Did you know Nintendo also makes video games? You know, the company you probably know for making talking flowers and children's storybooks. Yeah, they make games too, it's pretty crazy. But today we're actually not talking about that because, all jokes aside, Nintendo has been making a bunch of products that are video game related, but they're not really video games recently. And I just kind of wanted to bundle my thoughts on all of it into one video, so let's get started with that. You know, the video that kind of kickstarted this channel a couple of years ago was actually about the non-video game stuff that Nintendo had done in October 2024. But you know, there's a little more to it than just the things that I mentioned in that video, so I just kind of wanted to give my overall thoughts on a bunch of the things that Nintendo has been doing that aren't video games but are very much related to their video games. And you know, I'm not gonna go over things like Legos and all those partnerships that Nintendo has with other companies that are a little too broad for this video. I'm gonna more so focus on the things that Nintendo is doing very much internally in a way. It's usually very internal efforts that do involve partnerships with other companies, but you know, they're very Nintendo products. And for that, let's maybe start with the movies, because we did just have a very recent one come out just a week ago or so with the Mario Galaxy movie. But this actually started obviously in 2023 with the release of the first Super Mario Bros. Movie. And I find these products to be pretty interesting by themselves. You know, there's been kind of a tendency with more than Nintendo, actually a bunch of video game companies have been turning their games into TV shows or movies, and I don't really care for that trend that much. But obviously with Nintendo, I do love Nintendo, so I do want to talk about those movies. And let's start with the first Mario Bros. Movie, because that was, you know, a bit of a momentous occasion for Nintendo, because it was their first big budget, big production movie that they've ever done. You know, we had the Super Mario Bros. Movie in the 90s that was not great. But this is the real deal. Nintendo is actually starting to invest in this stuff now. And the first Super Mario Bros. Movie obviously represented the beginning of that journey. And I thought it did a really good job of it. You know, the Super Mario Bros. Movie wasn't mind-blowing in terms of, you know, the story or anything like that. But I think the story in these movies is very much just a vehicle for what Nintendo's really trying to do, which is introduce this universe to people. And especially with that first movie, I think it did a very good job of it. You got to know Mario and Luigi, and there were so many references to things that were around these two characters. You know, you got their parents, you got Spike, you got obviously Princess Peach and the entire Mushroom Kingdom, and then Donkey Kong, and there's the Mario Kart segment. There was a ton of stuff in the first Mario Bros. Movie that was really, really fun, and you saw it, and it was just all these comebacks to things you know, and that just made the entire experience very rewarding, just because it was cool to see these things referenced as a fan of the games and of the universe that these characters are in. It was a very cool experience overall, and I liked it a lot for what it was. Again, the story wasn't really the point, but it really did its job well enough to also get you invested in the characters somewhat. So yeah, I really, really liked the first Super Mario Bros. Movie. Obviously, there was a lot of music as well, a lot of stuff in there that I really enjoyed. So it was a very good experience, and I think for the first Mario movie, I think it really did do its job well, introducing this universe to more people. For the second movie though, and I already made a short about this, but I do think that I expected a little bit more, because, you know, it's no longer just introducing people to this world. I feel like at this point you kind of need to give people more reasons to be invested in these characters. If you want to create a cinematic universe for it, you kind of have to have a little more substance to it. And I think the second movie, the Mario Galaxy movie, kind of failed in that regard, because plot-wise, it is pretty much as basic as the first one. There's different angles to it. You know, there's more of a focus on Bowser and his relationship with Bowser Jr. You obviously have Rosalina in there, and there's a bit of story around her. But it still follows very much the same beats, where it's just quickly moving from one set piece to the next. And there's all these events that are happening, and it's really quickly trying to move from one to the next. There isn't really time to build a very compelling narrative and then for you to really get attached to these characters if you weren't already before watching the movie. So it's not worse than the first one. I just think that the expectations for the second one are higher because we've already done this, you know? So in that sense, it does feel worse, but it isn't worse in my opinion. Still, in doing what the first movie did, Mario Galaxy does that, and even more so with so many more characters and many more things. You know, obviously Rosalina and the Lumas, and you have special cameos with characters like Fox, which I'll get to more in a bit. Hey everyone, Editing Joe here. I said I was gonna talk about Star Fox later, and then I completely forgot to record that part of my script for some reason. But what I wanted to say is that Fox's inclusion in the Super Mario Bros. Movie actually feels like one of the better ways that they could have introduced a character in this movie. You know, with a lot of the Mario stuff that they had, it didn't feel like they gave you enough reason to care about that character. But I actually think Fox's inclusion, the way it was represented, and I said this in my short before, that it actually portrays him as a very sort of strong but fun character, funny and very capable. And I think they did a great job portraying him in a way that a kid watching that movie will be interested in Fox. And if the rumors of like a Star Fox game are coming true, you know, there was that report by the leaker Nate the Hate, and if those reports are coming true, now Star Fox, I think people who saw Fox in this movie are actually going to be really interested to see that game that Fox is in when it comes out, and I think that was done really well. I almost feel like they did that better than they did for the Mario characters in the movie. Wart from, I think, was it Super Mario Bros. 2 or something? And Birdo and all the Ninja. Like, there was a lot of scenes with a lot of references and a lot of characters from the Mario universe and other Nintendo universes, not just Mario. Obviously, Fox is the big one that they revealed beforehand. But there's even a little bit more. I don't know how much I can say here without spoiling it too much. It's really cool. All the references, there's a lot of action. I really liked parts of the movie where they actually even did this weird thing, which may have been a budget thing, but I think it also really fits Nintendo's approach sometimes because they do really like nostalgia. So there were these scenes where sometimes the story would switch to these 2D sprites as if they were in a game, a Mario game. Some specifically going back to like Super Mario Maker and stuff. And that was like really, really cool. Even if it may have been a budget constraint sort of thing, I think it actually fits super well in here. So yeah, I really did enjoy this movie, and it was really fun to watch, but it does feel a little lesser than the first one. And I think it really is more a matter of context, like the fact that you'll expect more from the second entry compared to the first one, where they were clearly just trying to bring this universe to a different medium. Now it feels like they should have given you more reasons to care, and they didn't. But yeah, I still did enjoy it, and I would recommend watching it if you're a Nintendo fan. But you know, this makes me curious and worried for the future of Nintendo movies, because you know, in just a year or so, we're gonna get the first Zelda movie, which is a live action movie. And you know, Zelda is not like Mario where it's enough to just throw a bunch of references at you. There's more lore, more things around the Zelda universe that people are attached to beyond just visuals. You know, people care about these characters and the stories that are told in the Zelda universe. And Nintendo so far hasn't really proved that they can make a movie that lives up to that kind of expectation. So I'm concerned and curious to see if Nintendo can make the Zelda movie as good as I think it should be, because you know, Zelda is my favorite game franchise. So I really want this movie to live up to what the games make me feel. And I'm a little concerned that it might not, because again, these two movies haven't really shown that Nintendo can make that kind of movie. But that's the movies. So next up, let's talk about something else that Nintendo made available a while ago actually, Nintendo Music. So Nintendo Music is a music streaming service that's been available since around October 2024. It's actually one of those things that I talked about in that video. And it's honestly alright. The way that Nintendo has been approaching Nintendo Music is that they usually add one new soundtrack, one new game soundtrack to the service every week. And every now and then they'll actually align new releases with other events that are going on in the Nintendo sphere. Like recently, when Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green were released on the eShop for the Switch, the soundtracks for those games were made available on the Nintendo Music in that same week. And that's kind of cool. And sometimes they'll actually delay the release a few days to like happen on the exact day that they want to, because it usually happens on Monday nights, but sometimes they'll move it around. And you know, that's kind of cool. And in other instances that they've done cool things that kind of give me more hope for, you know, the service. I know a few months ago, for example, they released like, I think it was like 17 black box NES games that were added to the service in one go. And that was nice because, you know, all these games have very, very short soundtracks that are like 10 minutes max. So obviously it kind of showed that, you know, we want to add some actual value to this. So we won't just release one game at a time if the game is this simple. And that's cool. I like seeing that. And I also like seeing those events where things do line up with certain real life, other video game things that are happening with Nintendo. But then that's kind of counterbalanced by a lot of situations where it feels very lame. A thing that's been happening recently is that Nintendo has been adding a lot of soundtracks that are just from DLC for a certain game. Like with Super Mario Bros. Wonder, we recently got the music from the Bell Park DLC. And that, you know, is still kind of neat because it did happen around the same launch, the launch of the game itself. So that's cool. But then we have things like Splatoon 3. Recently they added music from the Side Order DLC, and that was just DLC music, and that was the release for that week. There was nothing else. With Animal Crossing, it was even worse because they added music from the recent version 3.0 update that came out in January. But people have been pointing out that music from the DLC for Animal Crossing, you know, the Happy Home Paradise thing that was released in late 2021, I believe, that is still not available. They haven't added that. And again, that music from the update was the only release for that week. So, you know, these things are kind of counterbalanced. Like, sometimes they do cool things, and sometimes it feels like they're being too stingy with what they release. I understand that Nintendo wants people to stay subscribed. You know, they don't want to just add everything at once, because that might discourage people from keeping the subscription active to see what's coming next. But also Nintendo has so many games in their library. They could release 2 per week or more, and they would not be done adding soundtracks to the service anytime soon. So, you know, that is a little frustrating in a way. And I also wish Nintendo made better use of this in tandem with their other efforts, because, you know, there have been instances like with Kirby Air Riders, and one of the cool things that they did is that one of the Kirby Air Riders directs that happened before the game came out, they released a special release on Nintendo Music with a few songs from that game added to the app. And they actually did that twice even, I think. And it's one of those things where, like, that's a genius idea. You know, you make this music available. A lot of people care tremendously about this music. So if you make it available ahead of time, you get people in the mood for these games. They'll listen to it, they'll already start loving the music from the game before the game is even out, they'll talk about it, and they'll be extra excited to buy the game when it comes out. And I'm just so surprised that they haven't done that for anything else. And not only that, they haven't done the special releases beforehand, but at the very least, I feel like they should release music for that game, like around the same time that the game comes out. But they haven't done that. Like the Switch 2 games, so many of them don't have the soundtracks on Nintendo Music yet. And like, I don't understand, like even Donkey Kong Bonanza, that has a special release on Nintendo Music, but not the entire soundtrack. And I don't get why they're not using it more. And, you know, I do understand that in addition to, you know, the staggered releases, this is an extremely cheap music service. If you want to put it up against other music streaming services, those cost like what? Most of them are like $10 a month or something. Here you're paying $20 a year for NSO, which already includes all the other benefits, you know, playing online on Switch, a bunch of retro games on the Switch. Like, you're paying $20 a year for NSO and you get a music service added on top of it. Like, it's basically free at that point. And you know, that's fine, but I think they could definitely do more with it. But, you know, for all my criticisms, I really do like what Nintendo Music offers already. You know, I use it a lot. You know, they have, you know, these custom playlists that they create with songs for like different moods and stuff. And I actually use the running playlist almost every time I use a treadmill at my gym. I'm almost always listening to the running playlist from Nintendo Music. You know, during the day, I'll sometimes just play music while I'm at work, and it'll be like background music for me. And that's often how I get to hear a lot of the new music that is added every week. You know, I've been able to listen to all these soundtracks from games that I didn't even really know because I just played in the background while I'm working for hours on end. And it kind of helps me focus a bit more, so I like that too. And on occasion when I do get, like, I don't get to do this a lot because I don't sleep alone, but sometimes if I want something to help me sleep, there are also like playlists for very relaxing and calming songs, and I'll do that too. It's a lot of cool stuff. I really do enjoy what Nintendo Music offers. I just think, even from Nintendo's perspective, it could have been used better to promote their other efforts at the same time. But that brings us to the really fun part of this video, which is the physical stuff. And we're going to start with Rosalina's Storybook. So the Storybook is actually one of the big parts of Super Mario Galaxy that people are really attached to. The story told in the Storybook is one of the reasons that people really love this game, even though the story itself doesn't have much bearing on like the gameplay in general or where the game goes. It is really just backstory for Rosalina, but it's wonderful. And so having it in the physical format is really nice. And it's a really nice book too. Like, it's got this nice hardcover with this sort of golden foil pattern on the cover, on the front cover. It looks really nice. And the illustrations inside it, it's really great to see them printed on paper with this quality. Like, they're colorful, beautiful illustrations that, you know, they were pretty low resolution on the Wii, so to have them printed here, they just look really nice. And the story itself is cute. It's very adorable, you know, obviously for an adult, it's not going to be as impactful, but what's told in here, as simple as it is a beautiful story to like tell a child. There's emotional stuff to it. It feels like this kind of stuff that people really wanted to see in the movies. You know, it's very emotional and impactful. And yeah, it's a beautiful story. I actually bought 2 copies of this book, one for myself, just, you know, because I like collecting Nintendo things. But I bought one to give to my nephew, who was basically a newborn at the time. And I'm hoping, you know, that he gets to grow up hearing that story, because it's such a cute, nice story, as simple as it may be. Having it printed like this, the hard book feels really good. The artwork is beautiful, and it's just nice to have. Now, the book was announced alongside remakes or ports of Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2, and those ports actually added new content. Like the Super Mario Galaxy 1 added a few more pages to Rosalina's storybook, and Super Mario Galaxy 2 has like a brand new storybook that is kind of unrelated. This is just the story from the original Super Mario Galaxy. But I think that's probably fine. You know, I imagine this just got put into production before they decided to add the new pages in the ports, so it was too late to change it. But you're also not missing anything, really, because this story is entirely self-contained. It was designed this way initially. You know, the new pages are just things that Nintendo wanted to add 20 years later. So like, it doesn't really make a huge difference to the content of the book. And considering it's like $25, like, I think you're still, I don't know, the fact that the book feels so nice, it's over 100 pages, it's got all these beautiful illustrations. I think you got pretty good value here with the Rosalina storybook. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Again, I bought it twice, and yeah, if you're curious about it, I think it's definitely worth checking it out. Next, we have this little guy, the talking flower from Super Mario Bros. Wonder. This is honestly one of the most random things that I feel like Nintendo could have done, but at the same time, it's one of those fun, silly things that I actually just adore. I really like the talking flower. And actually, the talking flower is really, really simple. You open up the bottom of it, and you put batteries in, and then you use this really simple display under it, where you can set things up like the language, the current time, and when you start your day and where you want it to end, so it defines the periods in which the flower will talk to you. Once you've done that, the talking flower will randomly spit out something kind of silly every now and then whenever it feels like it, and it will also announce every hour of the day during the period that you've set. Now, I don't think there's a fixed interval for the talking flower to speak, but from my experience, I would say it talks maybe like 3 times an hour, including those announcements of what time it is now. Yeah, I would say about 3 times an hour, which is fairly chatty. I kind of like that pace. I think that's fine. Of course, if you wanted to talk on demand, you can just press the button on it and it'll say something.
Take a load off.
Or if you wanted to shut up for a little bit, you can hold the button for a while and then it'll just tell you like, oh, I'm gonna be quiet for a little bit. I also don't know exactly how long that is. There's probably information on that somewhere. Now, I think the interest in this is going to very heavily depend on whether you just like being talked at randomly, because there really isn't anything else to this. You know, it'll just talk at you every now and then. But to me, this thing has been like a super fun purchase because I sit in this room here all day, 6 days a week, working. Whether it's on my actual job or these videos, I'm in this room by myself most of the day, almost every day. So it can get a little monotonous. And so having this thing sitting on my shelf and just randomly spouting out something silly, something totally random that doesn't really mean much, is fun. It makes my day a little less monotonous and boring. It kind of keeps me sane a little bit. It's fun to hear every now and then just some random phrase or when it announces the time or something. Yeah, I actually really enjoy this. It's not gonna be for everyone for sure, but for me, this thing is actually really cool. You know, at this point I've had it for like a month or close to a month, and I've heard, I think, pretty much every soundbite it has. But still, hearing specific things at specific times, or when it tries to be playful, like sometimes when it announces the time, it'll be like, it's 12 p.m. and then it'll be like, oh, I'm kidding, it's actually 11 a.m. It's like things like that. It's fun. It just keeps things more lighthearted, which I kind of appreciate when I'm just focused on work the whole time. I really enjoy it. Also, a few days ago, it actually gave me a bit of a jump scare because I thought I had already heard everything it has to say. But one thing I had never heard is I was just, I was working and suddenly it started speaking French to me, and I thought it was glitching out or broken or something. But then it did that thing where I'm like, oh, just kidding, and then it said the phrase again, but in English. And like, I did not know that was possible. Like, I had already had it for a few weeks in my office every day, and I had never heard that. So that was shocking at first, a little scary. And then it was really fun that they were able to like sneak that in and still surprise me all this time later. So yeah, I actually really enjoy that too. Honestly, for the $35 that this costs, and I think here in Europe it's slightly cheaper, it's 30 euros. Like, I think this is totally worth it if you do appreciate that sort of whimsy randomness that it brings. Like, if you're buying this for a kid, this is not really a toy. All it does is sit there and it'll randomly talk at you. So, and if you press the button to hear it, you're going to hear everything very quickly and it's gonna get old. So like, you're not supposed to interact with it. It really is just supposed to sit there and you'll let it do its thing whenever it feels like it. And in that sense, I think it's really fun. For someone like me who works from home, who's always in this office, I kind of love that. So yeah, for me, this is definitely recommended. And finally, that brings us to the most technologically advanced of all these gadgets, Alarmo. Now, this is another one that was pretty old. It's been around for over a year. Came out around the same time as Nintendo Music, a little bit later. And I'll be honest, I kind of was very hesitant to get this one. I was very on the fence about it because of that $100 price tag. Like, that was quite a bit, and I wasn't sure it was going to be worth it. And frankly, I actually ended up buying it recently because it was on a big sale in this tech store here in Portugal. It was like 30% off a bunch of things, including Alarmo, so I got it for 70 euros instead. And yeah, that's why I bought it. I wasn't sure if I was really going to use it, but really, since buying it, it has been my alarm clock now. I stopped using my phone to wake me up in the morning, and it's just Alarmo. And I actually really like it. So from like a design and tech perspective, I think Alarmo is actually pretty cool. So it has this gigantic button at the top. That's how you access the menus, and then it rotates and you can navigate the menus that way. That's also really cool. And it lights up when your alarm is going off. And then there's also a couple smaller buttons where you can access your notifications to see things like your sleep stats. And there's just the back button, when you're using the menus. But it's pretty neat. Like, it's very basic, but also very adorable. Now, Nintendo mostly advertised this because of its motion sensor, which can detect when you're in front of the alarm and, do different things based on it. I think one of the simpler things that it does is that it actually, because it can detect your position relative to the sensor, when you approach it, the character on screen, whatever it is, will actually move to the position that you are in relative to the sensor. So if you're on the left of the alarm clock, the character will also be more so on the left. If you're on the right, the character will be more on the right. And if you just walk off screen, then the character disappears. So simple things like that. And also when it's late at night and you're in bed, the screen won't be off if you're sleeping. But then if you move in front of the sensor, it'll actually just turn on a little bit just so you can see the time. So it's actually really easy to see the time in the Alarmo screen. You don't even have to touch anything. You just move in front of the sensor and it will wake up. The screen actually manages to get really, really dim. So when it does turn on in the middle of the night in a dark room, it's not really bothersome at all, even if you have someone else in the room. It's a very dim screen. So you can see the time, but it's not going to bother anyone around you. It's not gonna flash at you and wake you up. It works perfectly fine. But it also gets bright enough during daytime so you can actually see the time totally fine as well during the day. So that's also really cool. I like that it has a very good range of brightness so that it can actually be used late at night in a dark room, but it's still functional during the day as well. That's pretty cool. The automatic brightness setting that it uses works perfectly for this. In my experience, it really suits whatever environment and time of the day that you're in at that very moment. It works really well. Of course, the big thing that the motion sensor is supposed to do is, it detects when you're waking up or going to bed. And when you wake up, when you get out of bed in the morning, that's how the alarm turns off. It only turns off when you get up and move away from your bed. And that's, in concept, that's cool, but I can't really use that because I don't sleep alone. I share my bed with my wife. So as Nintendo tells you, that can affect the sensor and it wouldn't work as well. Thankfully, there is a button mode that you can set for the alarm. So instead of using the motion sensor to turn off the alarm, when it goes off, you just press the big button on top and it turns off the alarm. Well, it doesn't turn off immediately, you do have to confirm. So it still forces you to wake up your brain a little bit. When the alarm is going off, you press the button, then the menu pops up asking if you want to turn off the alarm. You have to rotate and then press again to actually turn it off. So I feel like it does force you to wake up your brain a little bit more. It doesn't just let you lazily turn off the alarm, which I think is important for an alarm clock for a lot of people. So that's cool. And I actually really like it. That's why it works for me, is that I can actually just turn it off manually as quickly as I want to, and that way it doesn't have to disturb my wife as much or anything like that. It's very cool. On the software side, Alarmo uses sound effects from a wide range of different Nintendo games. And you can either choose a specific theme from a specific game, you can randomize themes within one of the games that you choose, or you can just go completely random where you can pick any game and any theme at any time, which is what I've been doing. I like variety, it's pretty cool. And it's nice. It's nice waking up to different music every day and not just the same loud alarm that I would have on my phone normally. The variety is very cool. And also I like in a way that the music that plays is very almost relaxing. It's not jarring right away. So something I've actually noticed is that when the alarm goes off, sometimes I actually think it's music in my dreams. It takes me a few seconds to really process and oh, this is my alarm clock, and then I have to turn it off. That has happened a couple of times, but I like that. It eases you into waking up. It doesn't just shock you awake. It's a more natural way to wake up that I actually really enjoy. And one thing that's also cool is that if you want to, you can connect the Alarmo to the internet and sign in with your Nintendo account, and then you can download not just updates for the software, which I've added a few new features, but you can download new alarms, which Nintendo is still adding semi-regularly. Just recently they added alarms based on Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which is pretty cool. And they've been adding a few every now and then, which I'm really glad to see. And I know that, connecting to the internet and all that, that's probably gonna bring up some questions if you might be worried about privacy or something. But for what it's worth, this is entirely optional. It's not even mentioned during the initial setup. I had to go into the settings myself to find the option to go online. So if you do want to just stay with the basic experience out of the box and not connect to the internet or anything like that, you have that option. You can definitely do that. But I think that's kind of the appeal of it, is that you can get more stuff for Alarmo. I like that a lot about it. A couple other things I want to mention with Alarmo though is that there's a couple other features. There's the sleep stats that it does. It uses the motion sensor during the night to kind of track how well you're sleeping. I'm gonna be honest, I haven't really looked at this at all. I don't really care about this sort of feature. So it's not really for me, but it's there if you want something to add like a little more value to it, it's there. One thing I really do like is called sleepy sounds. So you can set a bedtime, the time that you go to sleep. And if you enable sleepy sounds, if you lie down in your bed after the time that you've set as your bedtime, once it detects that you're lying in bed and still, it'll start playing a bunch of music from Nintendo games that is very relaxing, stuff to help you sleep, and you can choose whatever length you want it to play for. I think I did 15 minutes on mine. It can go higher though. And it'll just play those sounds to help you fall asleep as well, which I actually really enjoy. Again, I can't really do that because I share the bed and my wife doesn't like that as much. But from my personal perspective, I actually think that's a really cool feature. So I actually do really like that, and I got to use it the other day and I enjoyed it a lot. So that's also a cool thing about Alarmo. Well, that section on Alarmo was a little bit long, wasn't it? After all of that, would I really recommend buying this? Frankly, it's really hard to say yes when you're looking at a price tag of $100. Like, if you just want a way to wake up, you have your phone, and you can set alarm tunes on that. Like, you can change the music if you want to. And I think unless you really love Nintendo and you really have this passion for it and you really appreciate some of the quirkiness and the silliness that comes from just having this on your nightstand and that sort of unique vibe that you get from it, if you don't really care about any of that, then no, obviously I think $100 is way too much for an alarm clock. But if you are one of those Nintendo fans like I am, who really loves this stuff, who loves Nintendo, who likes the quirky things that they do sometimes, then I think if you buy it, I don't think you're going to regret buying it because, from a tech perspective, there's a bunch of cool things in it. The screen, I think, works really well for the purpose. It's well designed for what it sets out to do. It does its job pretty darn well, I would say. So yeah, if you are like me, I don't think you would regret buying Alarmo, but it's also really hard to recommend to anyone unless you really are invested in that Nintendo sphere, I guess. So yeah, it's not necessarily a recommendation, but for me personally, I definitely do not regret having it. I really like that it's on my nightstand every night now. It's been really cool. And that's about it. Those are all my way too long thoughts on all the non-video game things Nintendo has been doing for the past couple of years. I'm definitely curious to see what else they do in the future because I'm sure they're going to keep finding new ways to get into people's lives in that sense. So I'm very curious for what else they might have planned in this sort of sphere because I really like the stuff that they've been doing. I think that all of these products, as I just mentioned, all of them are pretty cool to me. I actually really appreciate them as a Nintendo fan. So yeah, I'm definitely curious to see what else is coming next. But for now, that's really about it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Do you have or use any of the things that I covered here? Have you watched the movies? What are your thoughts on all of this stuff? Do you like them? Do you not care? Just let me know. That's all for today. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.